Hey everyone, this is Kimberly, and I just wanted to take a quick moment before the movie starts to remind you of a few things. We all love our phones, right? Do me a favor and hit that silent button. We don't want any unexpected cameos from your ringtone. And while you're at it, dim that screen. We don't need any impromptu light shows unless it's a part of the movie. All right, now that we've got that covered, sit back, relax, and enjoy the film. Merci for keeping it classy.
Is a river that flows endlessly forward.
Imagine Paris lit by the moon or refraction of light from the Seine. Mysterious Paris. Hazard light reflected and refracted in the ebb and flow of the Seine. It was a haunt where some of these characters maybe felt safe. Some of them I call Nighthawks. Around the clock, dawn till dusk, and the different characters that you see under those bridges, if you just take the time to see it. Obsessed with the moonlight, being so fortunate to see so many, and the refraction of light and the pull of the energy, the mysterious shadows it casts. It's really beautiful. It was like chiaroscuro. You start to see depth, and the loving effect of moonshine on clothes could inspire the treatment of fabrics in some of these characters. So if you're like, moon bathed, like sun faded. That then sparked off an idea for print work. So we built a little studio, a little blacked out room, and we went in there with spots and torches and tried to recreate the light of Brass Eye. The pictures set my imagination. It's like a photograph. Sometimes we look at that beautiful pose. I'm always more interested in how the muse got into the pose, and then when it's broken, how she or he gets out of it. And it's either side of that fixed image that's really interesting, because it's the truth, it's the reality, it's the unconscious moment. I often talk about unconscious glamour. It's those moments that greatly inspire me. A lot of the boys inspired by the photographs, the stance, the nonchalance, the devil-may-care, mauvais garçon, kind of leaning against a brick wall, suspicious.
Yet here I stand, much like Sisyphus, trapped in time, yearning to embrace the moment. I've delved deep into my thoughts, questioning reality itself.
The photographs of Brassai inspired what we call gestural cutting. How you can produce an emotion in fabric. You can see their character, the impression they've left in that coat and how they're wearing it. I mean, for me, it's just like a joy because it can inspire a way of cutting clothes imbued with the habits of that character. Not just the shape, but, what did they do? Because I love that, because in the end, the character is just so rich and so informative. Some sort of overdrive I was receiving from the elements, wet Paris and rain, and it can inspire not just the cut and silhouette, but actual treatments of fabric. I would make up stories with in-house muses and who are a great, great part of the creative process. I mean, I couldn't do it without them. They bring so much to the equation. So I'd paint a little scenery, if you like, putting him in the situation. You've gone out by the bridge to have a quick cigarette and grabbed your boyfriend's cardigan and wrapped that round, that kind of idea of high life and low life. There's puddles, like skip the puddle, like children do, they pull their trouser legs up to avoid the puddles, but inevitably they do fall and you get them wet. How beautiful, how transformative that fabric. Got into vintage pinstripes, and I wet them with water to see what happened. That pale grey suddenly became black, like tar and shiny, and when it's wet it becomes sculptural, doesn't it? And we achieved that look with this amazing silicone printing. Routier, we called it. Obviously had umbrellas, but there was raindrops that were actually bees dripping off, and silicone magic that story builds with your team and around you. I love working like that. A fleeting moment in a photograph, it may have looked like a heavy tweed coat, but I wanted to make them as light as a feather. Real couture. We often reference the pictures of Peter Lindbergh for the perfect herringbone coat. How can I make that photograph real? Weeks and weeks we're working on the innards of this garment. What canvas or not canvas, organza or double organza, layers of lint, a final layer of chiffon. So the actual thing was as light as a dress, but now you could feel the presence of the tweed. If you grabbed it, it was just so light. Then we had the trompe-l'oeil print, and then the final layer was almost like an aquarelle, as if the moon had bleached the coat. That was a different shadow play of printing on net, silk tools, which was the top layer of the coat. All that outerwear was an illusion. So there you had it, along with a gestural cut. That's couture, darling. But the idea that you could wear this trompe-l'oeil, Peter Lindbergh inspired tweed coat on a beach is just everything. All those old techniques that one has learned, but in a new way. One of my heroes, Madeleine Vianney, I call her Mad Ellen. I mean, I have studied a lot of her work, really. The bias, it's a very special way of working. It's like working with oily water, and it's such a sensual way of working. I had done very beautiful embroidered bias cut dresses, never fully happy. Something always went a bit wrong. And always glancing at these V&A just, how did she do it? How did she do it, Well, just before I go to my grave, I discovered what the secret was. Thanks to technology, Alexei had taken some special digital pictures that we could open up. And we were studying. We were like, right, that's what she's done. The beading must always follow a 45-degree angle, which averts any pulling on fabric while the dress remains in the true bias. And it's liquid, mercurial, it's uncontrollable. You never, ever, ever stop learning magic. And you can see the dress, it's just like heaven. And it was that frozen moment with technology that revealed a secret that she took to her grave. A body morphology inspired by some photos of a great heroine, Ethel Ranger. You know, I had played with corsets before, but creating this shape inspired by these wonderfully voluptuous ladies that I was seeing in the pictures of Brassai. I'd never done the bias over such a shape before. It was quite extreme, the fit on the lower back side and the thigh. It was a very strong, voluptuous, feminine silhouette. As soon as we had the structure, the foundations, we could then build. It was just an amazing way to work at what looked familiar, but really wasn't on closer inspection. I think I spent longer on the corsetry and undergarments that my muses wore than the actual collection, because that had to be defined, it was polished, it was fitting after fitting, it was waist training, it was muses on the floor, with correct breathing and finding how to close their lower rib cages and cartilage and pull up from their perineum and their diaphragm up, and then learn to breathe from the upper part of the body. We were very careful, and we did have corset training for our muses. And we'd created 3 shapes. There was a cincher, there was one inspired by Ethel, and there was another one called the tulip, which was a fuller corset. And these were worn over a prosthèse. And then, already I knew I wanted to embrace a more womanly figure. And we wanted to define that silhouette on all our girls, but we had to find new muses. Boys in corsets, that was fun to do as well, because we were putting the trousers over the corsets. It's already what looked like a well-cut pair of Puck's trousers. On closer inspection, you saw the waist, how small it is, and how engineered the top part of the trouser was. It just gave the silhouette. The boys did corset training too. We couldn't rush the process, and they were coming in, we'd get them down to a certain measure, and they'd have to come back, and there would be a refit until we got to the desired measure. Sometimes you'd find Leon and Yara in the same room, and Leon would leave the fitting and kind of wink at me and go, "What did you get them down to?" And I'd share the figures. I'd get taken on 3 centimeters, so I'm ready for it. That competitive thing, you know, a lot of the boys got really into it then. And then, of course, you're taking the corsets off and revealing the courageous signs of markings.
The burden of existence etched into my soul lingers within me.
By then, as the characters had developed, then we knew kind of fabric we should be looking for and trawling around different flea markets. The chance that someone has a box of stuff that's kind of rusty and dank and falling apart, and there's no use for it. Someone like me. All that, to find the right tone, the fold marks were actually in the fabric. Different dyes were used at that time. So the aging process had started on some of these fabrics. That was perfect. And again, on one of my hauls, I found a pair of curtains and drapery from a sconce from some very grand house that was in lame with a metal thread. Those machines don't exist anymore, you know, where they use the real metal thread. You can produce lames, but a lame with that plumb liquid mercurial, you know, it's very rare. I think I can get a dress out of it. And where it had been draped at the window, of course it had been naturally sun-faded. Loved it. I mean, embraced it. The passage of time, the emotion, that what would eventually become the hem of the dress had already been worn out. So all these things that appealed to me, and yeah, we managed to cut a dress out, which was just amazing because it had all that life and emotion. It had vécu, you know, it had lived, this fabric, but that was not a special effect, that was the real thing. It did become a mini thesis, if you like, appropriately inappropriate, embracing things and seeing things that perhaps you would overlook, but seeing the beauty in it, or the possibilities, or that you could give this tissu another life. It's quite subversive. Fabric sequence was inspired by some beautiful shadow play photographs, surreal photograph of the Man Ray, and another obsession, and then the idea that I could do this on fabric by cutting this repetition of holes or what appeared to like fabric sequins. But first of all, I cut them completely out. And it was almost as nonchalant, I said, humble, almost like a string vest. So that suit became very loose and very illustrative. Further investigation into the sequins and interrupting the full cut of the sequin. So it would give you half crescent, like the moon. So it wasn't completely cut out, but you'd be able to see the flesh through it. So depending on the degree, how much you cut away, you'd see more flesh or less flesh. Depending where you engineered this technique, so on the widest part of a woman's body, for instance, around the hips, where the leg is articulated. Imagine you're walking, you're causing tension on your right leg, you relax the left leg. At that moment when you relax the left leg, the holes close. As you stride with your right leg, the holes open to reveal more skin. I mean, I called it winking sequence. Contemporary lace that would wink at you. I think at the same time I'd been working with Kim. So we were actually making something. So I was becoming familiar with her amazing silhouette.
In the dim dawn light, I awoke, a phantom in the half-lit room. With languid grace, I reached for his cardigan, its warmth a residue of shared whispers. Wrapped in the scent of fleeting affection, I slipped into the cold street. The city's breath mingled with mine as I sought solace, each step a poetic defiance of time's relentless march.
The counterpart of what had happened, dawn till dusk, early morning, the mists rising, and the terribly grand bourgeois family walking their dogs, looking for those goggles. Counterpart to the diaphanous and bias cut dresses, I wanted to show the discipline, the dedication that's all required of tailoring, that shape. She played the nanny in this outing. The idea that you can take a double take on things and have, you know, the Rorschach effect, inspired by the artist. At a distance looks like very classic polka dots, where you saw the warp and weft of the fabric, did look divinely moth-eaten, and it's very joyous circles and shapes. And honestly, if you look very closely, you could see the memory of Mickey Mouse. Everything you see is not necessarily what it seems. It's a connection, it's many images that must come from the subconscious, but they're very clear to me in my conscious life if I take the time. Being in the present, you can go from A to B You get there, you just don't know what happened in between. But that's life, the bit in between. So you just missed all that. When you think that life is as short as that match that Leon strikes on the sole of his boot, how fast that phosphorus lights that joint, and then burns out so quickly. Born to die. I've known Christian for quite some time. We come in and out of each other's lives over time. We started to weave the story with him, and he started to develop like the back of the heel that was echoing the silhouette of the prosthèse that we'd done. That shape, that illustrative line, was just a joy to work in that way. And literally we were on the floor and with tape, and his references are so fun. Dude, one of my earliest visions of my muses walking down that wet road was just seeing the red soles flashing, almost like the winking dresses. And we got that on film, and it was so beautiful. A lot of fitting, especially if you look at the profile of all the shoes in the collection that echoed that silhouette like the dresses, it was a lot of engineering. He had to reconsider the tabby for it to work, for it to actually be comfortable. We're talking tabby, and we're talking that kind of subversion, and then someone went on their phone and found a picture of Rolling Stone's cover, 1981, Start Me Up. And there's this fantastic leg boot. Christian started to look at actually some goat's hooves and things for textural inspirations and a different manner of material where we could have that rawness with that slick. And that it was part of that bourgeois family and was slightly loose on the leg as well. It was kind of like really cool, and the idea of putting it with a fitted coat like that was just like, wow. The fluttering of birds and the passing of time and getting to midnight. Hen and cat have been in this eternal loop, and they're still there. Maybe this gang would all just vampires.
Here we are again. Watching the same scenes. How many times now?
Too many to count. But isn't it amazing how each viewing feels new?
Predictable, yet unchanging.
The details change. Did you see the shadows?
Adaptation or illusion, we are trapped in this endless loop.
Why escape? Each loop offers something new to explore.
Ever the optimist. Perhaps that's what makes this bearable.
These women, each one had a story and appeared to be in complete control of their destiny. I call them ladies of the night. The idea that you could create a dress and through a dégradé of fabric, a dégradé of technique, a dégradé of color, a dégradé of texture. Imagine almost like a line drawing Then you start putting some aquarelle in. The textures get a little bit more dense. It's still quite see-through. Then all those degradés become a bit more intense around just below her hips. And right down to the hem is at its most opaque. The cut, the textures, the line, the color, everything. Like paint almost, and that opaque, like oil paint. That was kind of how I saw the retrograde, the inspiration of the moon in retrograde. And that from a distance, when they were backlit, they were walking, sleepwalking almost, friend, moon behind them, that you saw their beautiful form. You really couldn't read the top of the dresses until they were much, much closer. And then you realized it was like a line drawing. That's quite a magical way of working. And a lot of work deciding how opaque the opaque part should be, but still be light and still flow and not be heavy or dragging down. And then how linear right down to the top, which was like a cotton thread. Degradé, but degradé of the senses. One of those books that's been on my bookshelf forever. And I pick it up in quiet moments and I just lose myself in those images. The colors, the harmony, how he juxtaposed colors and those darkened eyes, and how you sense and feel the texture of the paint. And I introduced the studio to his work. We're all loving it and took that as an inspiration. And the idea that you could make Valentine look like she had just danced off a canvas, where we controlled the lighting, the shading by painting her. So there were masks that were made that had the applique inspired by his portraiture, which gave this beautiful shading and color. And that inspired another technique, the illusion of nudity, and that she was a muse dancing off this canvas, and then there was a body that you wore that was also painted. Lilacs, lime greens under the bust, and a purple nipple, I mean, heaven. And then we'd play with these retrograde dresses that were linear and then became more evident towards the hands. And then to further confuse the retina, I introduced a marking. So you actually believe that the bodysuit she was wearing was paint on her skin, because you saw the pubiscus area and the marking. I do remember when we first saw it, it was so beautiful. The marking needs to go on the bodysuit for the illusion. Was she really there? And those three girls, I wanted them to walk with just complete control. So that they, their soul, their spirit, could come through. Many of the younger team members know what marking was. So we kind of went online and we found images and explained to them that this was high fashion at that time in history and why women wore them. And it was an embroidery project for one of our gang members who applied herself beautifully, just like hair by hair on this tool. These markings that added to the illusion and looked so beautiful as well and so free. You've got a sense of freedom. I've tried this seamless bias cut before, where I would try and lose all the traditional fit seams in a dress into the image of a tulip or a flower. So all the traditional seams I would lose into the seaming of an embroidery. So the idea of the seam lace dress started, I wanted her to look like she was just airbrushed in lace and there were no seams. not just only no seams, but I produced volume in the go days, almost produced like a stocking. Every bit of the lace is découpé, cut out, and while you're doing that, you're fitting the dress at the same time, and then you resew. It's almost like an incrustation, and losing all your traditional fit seams and bust darts and show everything into the design of the lace. So you can produce the volume over the bust, even under the bust, but with no seams. It's almost like knitting a fine stocking you wear on your legs. You can only do that by hand. That was just, between the petit main and the mannequin, the muse, and you do a little and then you'd give it to them. It would come back and you put it back on Valentine, and it was like a hand in hand. That's why that technique took so long. A bit like the other dress, Reptilio inspired lace incrustation from the bias, where you see there's no fit seams around the bust and the torso, but you'll see a dégradé of tissue of fabrics that go from lace to georgette to chiffon, and then you feel the lace coming through the cutouts that were inspired almost by a boa constrictor, that movement that would amplify the silhouette that we were working on. So those two were technically fun to work on. This amazing character, Madame Bijou Lamont, this fantastic lady sitting in this brasserie captured by Brassai, and the character, the kind of the drinks piling up on the table and the falling stockings. Under the table, her shoes are lovingly polished. She's lived life. She's a real Parisienne. Elle a du chien. I've been in love with that image forever. So the idea that we could bring her to life was just a joy. Reverse swatching is sometimes swatching outerwear in lingerie-inspired fabrics, underwear in outerwear, like rubber. A subversive way of working, and not an obvious way of working. It can bring newness, and it's quite intriguing. Being able to go into like a gardening centre or whatever and find different materials lagging from the roof or foam was super inspiring to be able to create her silhouette in a very modern way too. It was beautiful cutting with foam and raw. We were on the floor just cutting it with scissors and creating volume, and then working out how to finish it or collage it with rubberized lace. Then the idea that, she's been sitting there for so many years with stockings that were poetically shredded, inspired by that picture, really. If you look under the table, you'll see. And layering tan color over black and considering that as a way of painting her jacket. So it was almost like a spidery lace, to shade with these stockings around the waist to enhance that shape. The narrative that weaves through the collection, and the idea that there had been some kind of transaction between pen and cat at this dread brasserie. It involved some stolen jewelry. She certainly didn't want to be caught with the bijoux in it, so she would have hastily stuffed them down her stockings and contrasted with a smartwatch.
I'm a dull woman, or rather the gambling dance of the late 19th century under the Parisian drizzle. In the light of the full moon, a beautiful, charming, sensual dream.
Dolls were a huge inspiration from the beautiful articulated doll that now everyone knows. Her name's Auntie, who would, in my imagination, she posed with a great artist. And I imagine she's been loved by many. There's something that, I don't know, one loves to death. One shares so much. Darkest, most lonely moments are with dolls. And how much information they take through one's life. Sometimes they're just discarded. You know, dolls that see so much, hear so much, feel so much, that could wisely inform your younger self of how life will turn out. The idea that, you know, you could take the humble material of a packing box that's been ripped with emotion, torn, and how beautiful that can look, and to take that as an inspiration. We called it cassetting. It was almost like three-dimensional rouleaus that were stitched down to mimic the corrugated part of a packing box. But it was made in organza, so it was transparent, or we made it in trench fabric as well. We had to get the right colour, that it was still believable as a trench, and still believable as a cardboard box that had been ripped. It was a huge amount of work. It was almost like concertina. And then the idea that this doll didn't have any clothes and that she would create her dress with what she could lay her hands on, which was this cardboard box and tape and wrapping paper and scotch. And it was almost like another illusion. It was a two-dimensional image of a trench coat that wasn't a real coat that we would normally fit away. Had to be approached as the flat thing, almost like a two-dimensional, and it was a child's version. You know, when they draw coats, that's what we were trying to do out of a cardboard box, but using, you know, the most incredible techniques and trying to defy gravity. Retrostirage. While we were creating the shapes, it had to be the tweed. There's a whole wash process, a quite violent wash, to produce the shrinkage and the texture desired. So you have that nobility of the fabric. You sense the heritage, where it's come from, but then you put it through this, it's almost like a glue that we created, which you would silk screen onto the pattern pieces. So wherever you wanted to create reset, which means to shrink. So we had that hourglass figure almost. But once the glue was on there, everything else would shrink, but that would stay static. You can imagine it took quite a few visits to the bathhouses. The bathhouse was in Belgium. One jacket came back, it was like the size of a Barbie doll. It had shrunk that much. Finally get to the desired silhouette in the collection, the illustrative figure, the line. That was a lot of backwards and forwards and hand in hand, and recipes that had to be recorded and changed. Even if the temperature was different or the dye color. And then, yes, anatomical design, kind of shrinking things down to the spine and the articulations in the spine that appeared across the back of the jacket in three-dimensional form. The technique was photo. Striped tees was a very humble, almost like a shirting fabric from a school uniform or kindergarten. And the idea that you could close all the blue stripes together, lose the white, so you produce an area that was all blue, or vice versa. You tuck away all the blue and open up the white. And with the idea that you could degrade and shade as well. So you could actually make the waist, but you could shade it even more by closing the stripes to the blue on the waist and gradually releasing them to enhance the silhouette of that corset. So it moved, and it was almost like a painting, enhancing the shape. Very humble technique. By now, you must be aware that I'm totally obsessed with the waist. She was one of the dolls that had been taken out for that backyard Sunday morning with that straight bourgeois family that unfortunately had fallen into the sand. They saved her, but of course part of her was wet. And we achieved that look with this amazing silicone printing that I did on silk taffeta. But when you printed on it, the silk went transparent, which was really quite something to see on her majestic shape. And you got like a dégradé of wetness, you know? Very subversive, very striking. You know, she put the time in, the corset training, came for the fittings like a real trooper. We had such fun with her. And to end the show like that vision of her, that beautiful image of her walking into that white light was just everything.
What is a doll after all but a simulacrum of life, yet devoid of the vitality that courses through human veins? My eyes are painted, yet they see not. My lips are sculpted, yet they speak not. But here, in this liquid void, I am more alive in my thoughts than I ever was in the confines of my porcelain skin.
Porcelain dolls, hauntingly beautiful, and a huge inspiration for the work we did with Pat McGrath. We have been steadily getting to, when we called it Margiela skin.
I've been working on the idea of hyperluminous glass skin for many years. Once I heard the brief from John for the Artisanal 2024 show, especially around the surreal luminescence of porcelain dolls from the 30s, I knew this was the moment to bring something very surreal to life.
The shine, the dewiness, the no makeup, highlighting with serum, all invisible to the naked eye. But on film, she was contouring and shading with invisible magic.
It was a challenge because we needed to find a way to give the skin a glass-like finish over a full face of makeup. I really wanted it to look like a digital filter brought into the physical world.
She was greatly inspired with her team, and they mixed all manner of potions, and of course they recreated the makeup. But she kept saying, "We've done that, John, we've been there, John. I want to push this more, I want to push it."
The idea of using a peel-off skincare mask came from a desire to give the skin a porcelain-like finish. These types of masks leave your skin looking very smooth and shiny, but they are messy and sticky and would ruin any makeup underneath. The process was extensive. Overall, we spent many years perfecting the technique. For the Artisanal 2024 show, we went through countless trials over many weeks, experimenting with different formulas and application methods to achieve the perfect balance of sheen and durability.
The beginning process with hair was more working on an expansion of silhouette. It gave the idea of looking back historically and looking through inspiration that was outside of beauty. We took old fabric bandage, a medical bandage, soaked it in water, and molded the reverse of the head on models. The idea that this porcelain doll that had been loved so much had been left to weather and wear. It's as if it had sat in an attic with the sun shining through a crack in a window, and everything had aged apart from this incredible porcelain. In profile, you would read the sort of front hairline that would present sort of human, beautiful hair, but the backside would be fabric that wasn't polished or finished in a certain way. The colour story in the wigs became quite important. We landed on this red or this orange or this burnt golden colours. None of them could be the same, but they all needed to be within the same world. So some were way more vivid, some were more lived in. But when they sat together on the shelf on the mannequin heads, it felt like one world. Working with John and listening to how he tells the narrative of his characters, quite a few different sections through the story, and taking that on board, we have to look at each character and really go through the process of discussing the life they've led or the story they're telling or the journey they're taking. So the boys, for example, there was the suggestion of humidity, a cold, damp night on the left bank in Paris. There's humidity, there's moisture in the hair, they've been running, they've been chasing, There's product in the hair, but it's 5 days old. The hair's kind of molded together from this constant suggestion that they're trying to maintain that style that they so desperately want to portray.
You know, how do you make a hair look wet? And how do you show the humidity, the glaze of moon? And it was a scientist's ball of big mixing stuff and products and all manner of things that could work to give something that looked like porcelain does. They came up with it. And it was just breathtaking. Well, the rest is history, really.
Using an airbrush machine and spraying it on in very thin layers ensured it wouldn't disrupt the makeup underneath. It also gave the skin this otherworldly effect, like we had taken a digital filter and brought it into the real world. It was a labor of love, and seeing it on the runway was beyond anything I could ever imagine.
But in between each layer, you had to allow 4 minutes to dry. We were putting a show on and had to get the time down, and there was the ritual of dressing. You know, there was all the undergarments, the corsets, the dressing, and the wigs to put on top. So, and she managed to get the time down, which was like incredible.
Everyone who worked on the show had an inkling that it was truly something special. And when seeing the hyper-reflective skin paired with John's history-making designs, I had a feeling it would captivate imaginations of fashion and beauty lovers alike.
Her mother came up with just haute beauty. When she brought the little child down, the whole room went silent. It was one of those moments of speechless. And she looks at you with those big eyes like, what do you think? And I was just like, heaven, legendary, iconic, everything, mother.
The scale of the response has been mind-blowing. It's been incredible to see people connect so passionately with the transformative, otherworldly artistry. I couldn't be happier.
And the impact that had was legendary too. Inspired so many children.
Idea of fantasy, this world building, kind of like a lost art.
The drama. John Galliano is such a master storyteller.
You can see the stories unfold within the draped garments, the cinched waists, even the way the models were gallivanting down the runway.
They took you into their inner world.
It was so completely immersive. You could see, feel, hear, taste what it would be like to be in that world.
The storytelling was...
You don't even have to explain the context.
For the first time in a long time, we were looking at something that really felt like everything went into it.
The silhouette, the lighting, it felt like a painting. It just come to life.
It really felt like a piece of performance art.
There was a very deep connection, and people started wondering where these characters were coming from or moving towards. What's their story in a way? It made it very real.
Blurring of boundaries between mediums and time in a way that was so fluid. Is that rain on the jacket or is it stitching?
The aquarelle draping technique, as well as the porcelain pieces that were actually leather.
The articulated gloves on all the models and the hats.
It twisted how things could look.
It transcended what I believed a runway show could look like.
Every detail really painted a cinematic portrait of fashion.
It's something we don't get all that often. Everything now feels rushed and sort of very quick.
When technique hits passion, passion hits technique, and it creates duende, which is that moment in flamenco. And it's a soul cry, a soul echo.
Just something we haven't seen in a really long time.
The idea of John creating a collection like those collections that had really inspired us to fall in love with fashion.
I remember that when I was 13 years old, almost every fashion show was an event. It's almost like they wanted you to experience something different. When things shifted a little bit, all of a sudden everything felt a bit safe, vanilla. For the older generation, it felt familiar. It felt like home again. And for the newer generation, it felt fresh and new.
For the younger generation, it had given them what they didn't even know they needed.
The idea of that living again, but in a whole new form that felt entirely personal, revolutionary, subversive, new, but imbued with so much meaning.
It truly just spoke to the viewers to show them that couture and fashion have new definitions and originality is not a thing of the past.
C'est l'univers intense que John Galliano a créé en mettant en avant des silhouettes hors du commun sur des corps divers. En 2024, on voulait voir de l'inclusivité et ça nous a plu.
I loved that curved models were included, and we weren't just included, like we were really a part of it, and we didn't take away or we didn't add to the show, like we were just a part of it. And it was just pushing the boundaries on who is considered a model. I really loved that, and that means so much to me. I know it means so much to so many little girls out there who want to be a model, but they've never been thin their whole lives. One of the biggest shows in the last how many years is showing girls who are not just a size 0.
As a woman with hips, I felt seen. I felt like my body could be decorated and adorned.
More often than not, fashion usually is sold to us through this unrealistic lens of cool, sexy, and young. And I think, as great as those concepts are, they aren't realistic. What we've kind of been missing is this human connection to it. And I think this show underscore the humanity of fashion.
Everybody could be a part of it.
The ability to relate. I could see myself and those around me in the way the characters dressed, walked, and presented themselves.
The obscure nature of it is the first thing that really made me want to recreate it. It is something that you don't see every day.
There was so much depth.
The setting was not glamorous, it was seedy. The looks appeared frail, the characters looked tortured. The red soles of their shoes evoked a sense of sin or pain in their past.
There's so much tension between the model and themselves, and you see them as they're exploring the space with so much curiosity and sometimes fear.
It was both terrifying, beautiful, on the verge of vulgarity and scandal.
Seeing these characters move, come to life, and it's something you don't see often.
Yet this collection proves that using these very human elements can in fact be very beautiful.
Porcelain doll, glass skin was something I had never seen anything like before.
I remember watching a clip. I thought, how? Was it a mask? Was it makeup? What kind of witchcraft was this? Pat McGrath. Of course, it made sense.
Seeing a technique that has never been done before sets my soul on fire.
That look was so innovative.
It just made me so excited.
In a world where algorithms keep on pushing you the same thing over and over again, the show is so different that stood out to a lot of people.
The antidote to this kind of algorithmic loop that we've been stuck in for so long.
It wasn't trying to be viral, and I think people can spot a mile away when it's recycling trends and force-feeding things that we should like.
And if it isn't a reflection of yourself, then it won't be successful.
Every part of it felt like a pure, authentic expression that wasn't bending to any trend or audience. That really resonated and left you feeling inspired.
And in the times we live in, that sort of artistic joy can truly change us.
It made me feel like a new world was opening up. To try and be part of that world. You could be yourself and express yourself and your art through this new world that the show opened up.
Ability to connect with the audience and make anyone who watched it feel something.
It made me feel things. things.
It made you feel something, and it was really inspiring. It made me want to go and draw and interpret the creativity that I just experienced.
And I, like many others, were able to fully immerse ourselves by creating looks inspired by the show.
또 이렇게 저처럼 다양하게 시도를 해보고 싶어지는 메이크업이었고 다른 사람들 역시 제 시도를 궁금해해줬기 때문에
These layers of craft and detail and stories and references which really created this magical world that was full of all this meaning for people to interact with, spend time picking apart, figuring out, learning from, and then also attempt to become a part of and remix further, like almost kind of like fan fiction.
It made me feel empowered, like I could be anything. It is something that comes from really deep within you, and I felt like a new me was coming out.
It was rebirth for many of us.
I think this show was so powerful because it showed us that those most human aspects of us, although they are imperfect and tattered, are still beautiful. It presents humanity in a way that I think many people resonate with.
It reverberated to such a degree that it entered our bodies and it changed us on a cellular level, and we couldn't help but cry out in celebration because we saw flamboyance and hugely elaborate, decorative, subversive, masterful craftsmanship put on display with a story that could only come out of the mind of a creative genius who has truly lived an extraordinary life.
And I think that is why this show has had such an impact.
It was a beautiful moment in time, and I'll never forget it.
Seeing images after of kids putting on trench coats back to front and running down the metro and mimicking Leon's walk, or shoving pillows up their dresses and things to mimic Lulu, and the makeup. If you can do that to a young kid, it's just the hugest compliment. You've created this world, you've invited them in, and they can live through that world. It's quite heaven. This was something that, along with being conscious and along with being authentic and driven by passion and beauty. Beautiful clothes take time to make, time to fit, time to finish. In a world, often, where one's tastes are data-driven or we are informed by algorithms, this was real. This was emotion. This is the way I work.
unrelenting river erodes the cliffs of the past, reminding us of life's impermanence and the futility of clinging to what once was. We are but fleeting echoes in the vast expanse of time.